if we can be inclusive as a society about what we believe reading is, we will have a lot of people who don't think they're failing, who don't feel embarrassed or ashamed.
So today we are joined by the open-minded Emily Watt. As a literacy lead, Emily is known for juxtaposing rigorous research-based pedagogy with a relentless ambition to prepare children for our challenging and changing world. Her approach is beautifully human, bringing an ambitious drive, a distinct zing, and a fresh way of looking at things in the classroom. And so welcome Emily Watt to Well Said.
Cricket Green School is a 4 to 19 intake special needs school, and we have a massive range of needs. We have children who find learning incredibly difficult and who perhaps don't ever learn to read or to do maths in the way that you would expect people to be able to do it. And we also have students who are working at level 2, which is kind of at GCSE level. And sometimes those children are in mixed ability classes. For some subjects, we do stream in Key Stage 4, we stream English and maths because we do qualifications and accreditation. And so we try and make sure that everyone is on a pathway to success at whatever level they are working at. And in the sixth form, we have the same sort of situation whereby in English and maths, the lessons are streamed again to make sure that everyone has the best opportunity to become as independent and as employable as they possibly can be, and to live a really successful life, basically, regardless of their need. In the primary school, our classes are generally very mixed ability, and they're also mixed around age as well. So we may have reception year 1, year 1, year 2, year 3 classes. It depends really on the cohort of pupils, the needs they have, the support that's required. And sometimes based on a little bit on personalities as well, to make sure that everyone has the best opportunity to be the best they can be.
I think that's really interesting, actually. So when you have your children coming into the school, to say it's not necessarily the classes wouldn't be based on their age, it'd be based on their ability. Is that right? So you'd kind of mix them together. There could be a wide range of ages, or not really?
Not really, no. I mean, the ages are generally, in primary, they're mixed, and it would be maybe across a maximum of 3 years. So for example, reception year 1, year 2, or
Okay.
And going up all the way into year 6. And then in year 7, it's just year 7. Then we mix again for year 8 and 9. And then it's separate for year 10 and 11, and then mixed again in the sixth form.
Wow.
So, yeah, it varies quite a lot. And the classes aren't necessarily done by ability. There are so many factors that feed into these things. So, as I said before, how much support they're going to need, behavioural requirements, that sort of thing all feeds into how the classes are decided.
So it's like a big jigsaw puzzle, really, trying to
I
fit
think
all
so.
the pieces in. I mean, that credit to anyone who can sort that out, because that is far more complicated than mainstream in terms of organisation. You've got things in mainstream to think about, like behaviour and how the class gel, relationships, their ability and stuff. But trying to factor in all the elements that you've just spoken about is quite an operation, really. So how large are the classes then? Are they similar sort of size, no more than 10, say, or?
So I would say yes, at the moment they're between maybe 8 and 10 pupils. And what's really lovely is that our senior management team know the pupils really well. And so when the classes are decided and they ask advice, obviously, from the teachers, but they are able to create classes that work well because they are engaged with the pupils, they know the pupils, and it feels that there's a lot of knowledge about every pupil across every kind of layer of the teaching, support, and senior management staff.
Oh, that's lovely because then it feels like more of a like a family feel as such. And if every child feels like valued and known, then that really must help establish the safety element, the relationship building, the belonging to the school as well. That's all
I
important.
think so. I mean, our head often, thinks of our school, I think, as like a family, and that we're all here. We're all here to create a beautiful time for our pupils. They're only going to be at school once. It should be an amazing time and an opportunity for, friendship, learning, and a time to test out things that you probably don't want to do in later life or in society. Work out how to manage behaviours that are quite difficult, understand about language, and this is a really safe and secure place to do that. Every day is a new day. There's no kind of grudges held. It's you've made that mistake, that's fine, let's move on and continue, and just try and learn from what we've done all together. I think
Mm.
it's a lovely place to work, I have to say.
Definitely. When I before I became a teacher, I was a teaching assistant, and then I was a one-to-one, and I worked alongside a little boy who had Down syndrome. I've got to say, it was two of the best years I think of my career, to be honest. Absolutely adored it, and I got on so well with the family. It was really nice for them because I think outside of school they actually struggled to find someone that would be capable of looking after him when for like babysitting and things like that. So I worked with the family doing that, and part of that element was learning Makaton. Do you use Makaton in your setting quite strongly?
Yeah, we do. It's really helpful because you kind of just emphasize the main words in the sentence. And this is not Makaton, by the way, what I'm doing with my hands. Um, and yes, it's really helpful because for children who find it difficult to process a lot of information, or who find it difficult to listen, they may get, three main words, the key words in a sentence being told simply through the gesture or the signing of the whoever's speaking to them. So I
Yeah,
think it's really important because essentially good communication is what helps you to have a successful life. If you can communicate your needs, what you like, what you don't like, even if it's in the most kind of simple or basic fashion,
mm,
that's going to be better than not being able to do it. So it's really important to us that our students have that capacity to communicate about themselves.
yeah, that's amazing. I loved learning it, and I felt that because I think quite a common misconception with Makaton is that it is like BSL. It's every sign for every word, and like you said, it's not. It's just the key messages within that sentence that are being kind of signed, so that whoever you're communicating with can kind of pick up on what the message is, what you're trying to say back. And it's those key elements that can really just light up someone's understanding, that it's so powerful. And I know it commonly known, but having things like Mr. Tumble on TV, that being such a widely accepted and loved program, is
Yeah,
fantastic.
exactly.
I mean, it really
It's
shows
great.
time, doesn't it?
It's just showing that um, you don't need to always communicate in the traditional ways that we're used to. You can communicate in lots of different ways. And I think it's brilliant that he's brought that to the mainstream, and that it's much more visible that perhaps some people do need a little bit of extra help, and it doesn't matter that they need extra help. That should just be part of our day to day.
Definitely. And I don't know about you, but because I don't use it as much anymore, obviously, but when I was using it every day, and as you would be, I felt I was coming home and carrying on using it, like with my loved ones around the house. They're like, what on earth are you doing now? You don't need to do that. Like,
Oh, I
also,
know. It's too easy to do. I used to sign a few Christmas carols. I'd be singing. I just couldn't help doing the tree. But less so now. Less so now, I have to say.
yeah, it's interesting though, because I've got two very young children. One's 3, one's 1, and my 3-year-old's a brilliant communicator. My 1-year-old isn't as strong as he was, and I'm finding that just using a little bit of Makaton, even things like more, really useful for her, because she is able to pick up on some key things that I'm asking her through Makaton. And it's really, for me, it's just opened up a whole new world of communication. It's just a fantastic tool. I don't think you need a bit any, it could be any ability to use it. I think it's just a great opportunity to communicate, but like you said, in a different capacity.
I think so. If you're just emphasizing something, it's just another way of getting a child or an adult, whoever it might be, to hear or to understand, to listen, and to ultimately really engage with somebody else in a communicative pattern.
Mm.
And once you start learning the basics of communications, a conversational techniques, then you start, to be better at communicating. Even if you're only communicating your wants, you can see that someone else can help you with that, and that just promotes your independence and your ability to get, to the next step along the way of whatever your path might be.
Yeah, fantastic. So, Emily, tell me a little bit about the role that you play at Cricket Green School.
Well, I'm a teacher first and foremost. I have a year 11 form class. I've had a year 11 class for a long time. Um, but I'm also the literacy lead. So basically, I'm in charge of literacy from EYFS through
Wow.
to Key Stage 5, so at the age of 19,
Oh.
um, which covers a huge amount of
Mm.
things, basically. So um,
That's a big role.
I yeah, it is a big role, but it's really enjoyable, and I've learned a lot, and I feel I really like it because I actually like learning. I know it
Mm.
sounds really cheesy, but I
Honestly.
do, and I really am enjoying learning about literacy and about reading and how we can make it better. But back to your original question, um, yes, so I basically have a curriculum team and a reading lead, and between us, we are in charge of basically running literacy uh, all the way throughout the school. And it's interesting because in Key Stage Form 5, we have accreditation. So I've learned a lot about, functional skills and the different ways we can get our students qualifications to move on to college. I don't think they're the be all and end all of everything, by the way, but they are part of our society. So we have to
Mm.
do what we can and engage with them as much as possible. I love thinking about the primary school in terms of how creative we can be and pulling that creativity through into the secondary school and making sure that children are accessing reading in whatever capacity they like to read. So we have groups that are pre-readers, phonics groups, guided reading groups, and that runs all the way through our school. Well, phonics runs currently up to year 9
Wow.
as an intervention. Yeah, so um, we started with phonics in primary, and
Hmm.
that was really successful. And as our primary students worked their way up through the school, um, when they entered into year 7, we'd have students often coming from other mainstream schools, joining our pupils, and so they still would need some phonics training. Not all pupils, because it doesn't work for everybody.
Mm.
Um, but for those that it's working for, it's really important to us to teach children to read if they, have that capacity and that ability, and to keep trying. So we have year 7 phonics, and then we've just recently pushed that as an intervention into year 8 and 9. So,
Wow. That's
and
amazing.
then my next step is to keep it as an intervention for years 10 and 11, but it just takes time and money, unfortunately.
Yeah, but I'm guessing you'd use like a normal mainstream phonics scheme, would you, and just adapt it,
Yes,
or the specific
we
ones
do.
that come to you?
We use the little Wandle
I
scheme.
use Little Wandle, yes.
Yeah, and it's great. And we picked it primarily because a lot of our feeder schools use Little Wandle, and so having that continuity is really beneficial.
Mm.
It's also um, it's also just really nice. I really liked its kind of I liked its books. I liked the training. I liked it. So I'm
Yeah,
not going to plug
yeah,
it too much, but I did like it,
yeah.
and it's worked really well for us because the students can progress at their own rate, and you can see the progress that they are making, and there's lots of repetition, and they enjoy it. And so I feel it's working really well, and you can see the progression now that we've had it in. We've been using this one, I think this is our third year, or maybe it's
Yeah,
our fourth, I
yeah.
forget. And you can really see how pupils have progressed, and they understand the way the lesson works and what's expected of them, and then they have the books to do the guided reading, so that you feed in the comprehension and the vocabulary, and it's a system that works well, I
Mm.
think.
No, that's lovely. And when I was teaching, and we were quite often trying to get ways for the children to kind of, I had a classic, mainly summer born boy class, so very heavy. But stereotypically, they were reluctant writers. They weren't very keen, and so we were trying to think of engaging ways to get them to want to learn. And my brief experience in a special school is actually part of my teacher training, so it was very, very brief. But I remember, and it stuck with me all these years, being in a classroom and they were doing an English lesson. I can't remember the book, but they were reading a book. But to make it, obviously, it's that multi-sensory element. And for me, as a teacher in a mainstream, I thought there was so much learning for me from this lesson, where all the children in the room, I think there's about 5 of us, were sat down on a chair, and when the teacher was reading the story, I think they're in the sand at one point, so the staff around them would be taking their shoes off, putting their feet in a sand tray, and then they were talking about the rain coming down, and they'd get little drops of water and sprinkle that on them. And it was this kind of like multi-sensory, fully immersive experience that for me as a teacher, I thought, wow, you don't have to have a need to benefit from this type of learning. This is absolutely amazing. So that's really stuck with me in my teaching, to make sure that it can be multisensory, it can be exciting, and it can be a way to kind of be very inclusive and immersive. Because what a great way to learn about the rainforest or the desert if you're feeling the sand and touching the moisture in the air and stuff. And I was just curious, in terms of your capacity, you must have seen some really exciting and innovative lessons. Have you seen any that have stuck with you, especially with writing, to kind of engage your children?
I think, yes, we have. I mean, you see lots of lessons where staff will use sensory stories, or they'll use bits of video, because it's really important to remember that you can walk into a lesson assuming that people will know what a beach is,
Mm.
and actually they might not. Some people have never had that kind of learning. So some of the lessons that I've really enjoyed have been those lessons which have had the sensory input, and the children have felt the sand, and they have been able to go outside and make buildings in the sand. I've seen lots of lessons where the children have done like a carousel
Mm.
of acting, so they've seen the story and it's been acted out using little figurines and bricks,
Yeah.
and then they've been allowed to play with those figurines and bricks and make their own little story. Then they've acted it out. They've done some labeling of parts of the story to learn, and then they've been outside and they've been able to kind of, I don't know, do kind of like a run around of the story almost, and use cars or whatever it is to play with, so that all of the learning is there. And then they've gone to the teacher table and they've done something a bit more perhaps structured. But all of it has contributed to this one point of being able to experience it. And that kind of experiential learning, I think, is essential for all children, because if you have a great experience, you're more likely to remember it and use the vocabulary, and then you can contextualize something, and you might just it might just come to you one day and you'll be like, oh yeah, I do know what a beach is. I remember putting my toes in the sand and the water being poured on my feet, that sort of thing. And when you can make those connections, then you can start to transfer your knowledge into other areas, and you can think, oh yeah, the sand felt gritty, or I didn't like the feel of that sand, so I can write that in my writing or my story. So
Right.
I feel like that sort of learning is essential in terms of the writing aspect of it. We have students who are really competent writers, and we have students who are brilliant with their vocabulary and their speech, and then they can't put it on paper. So, and then we have children who need lots of help with all aspects of, their vocabulary and the writing. And so you see teachers really working hard to create scaffolds for all these different needs. So it might be communicating print, it might be having a photo of the story or whatever it is they're learning about, and then some labels to put on it. It might be that you're ordering 3 words using communicating print. It might be that you have a writing frame. It might be that you're just let loose and told, yeah, have a go and write this, because we've got all the levels, and often we've got quite a lot of those levels in one room.
Yeah.
And so it can be quite challenging to get,
Yeah.
so much from our pupils, but the staff here work really hard to do that, and to make sure that everyone, has an opportunity to demonstrate their learning and you know, their participation in the lesson, I think.
Definitely. I imagine from what you've just said, relationships with the students are kind of critical in the sense that, like they are in any school, but especially in your setting, to kind of understand what makes those students tick, what will engage them, what would give them their best learning outcome by doing things in a certain way, and really understanding not only their need, but their kind of their desire, their interest, to kind of get them like intrigued and wanting to participate as well. I guess it's that sort of behavior element you've got to deal with as well. And I was just, when you were talking before, when you were saying about a lesson, would the structure typically be like a bit like a continuous provision? So they might have a bit of input with the class teacher, then they could go off and explore that experimental learning like outside and see what's going on.
So yes, that continuous provision happens a lot in our primary department. And as the students get older, that continues to some extent. And then, for example, in my year 11 classes, there is definitely more an element of that kind of, you start with the plenary and then some input. You don't start with the plenary, I'm sorry. You start with the input, then you do the lesson. There might be different activities depending on where they're at, and then you bring it all together at the end. So it kind of depends on the learning behaviours of our pupils, because it's not always possible to teach in the way that I teach some of my year 11 or sixth form classes. You might have to rethink and do a more kind of, I guess, carousel learning. And also, lots of teachers are in our secondary department are primary trained and really good at doing the carousels, and that kind of learning in different ways. So it just really it varies on I think many things, but mainly the aim is to make sure that the pupils are progressing from the beginning of the lesson to the end as much as possible.
And just from a curiosity element, with the secondary part, say you've got a year 11 class, is it that you'd like, just like primary, in the sense that you'd keep your year 11 class for all subjects, or do they go to different teachers for different subjects?
Oh no, they go so from year 7 through to this, well, let's say year 7 to year 11.
Mm.
It's much more run like a mainstream secondary.
Oh,
So
wow.
the students may have different teachers for quite a lot of subjects. They have a form tutor,
Yeah.
And quite often the form tutor will teach English and maths, or just English or just maths, depending on whether the classes are streamed, that sort of thing. But they have specific PE teachers, there are science teachers, and I think we try and play to the strengths of our staff a lot.
Mm.
Primary is much more like a primary school. The teachers teach pretty much everything.
Yeah.
And in the sixth form, um, I go in and teach English in the sixth form, which is a dream. I really enjoy it. And I know our maths coordinator teaches maths to some of the sixth form students. A lot of the time they are taught by the sixth form staff. And I think, I think it could be more mixed, but timetabling, I'm imagining, is quite tricky. So
Oh, yes.
yes, it works really well, I think, in these kind of three different blocks. And the sixth form staff know the sixth formers so well. Sometimes they have the same students in their class for 3 years, because we have a 3-year sixth form.
Yeah.
Whereas in year 10 and 11, it's just for 1 year,
Oh, right. That's
and
very
then they
interesting.
move on.
Very interesting. And I was just thinking about, when the students leave, like I say leave, they're still part of the same school, but primary, and they go to the secondary. So have you got one large building? Have you sorted your site situation out?
We have got one, two, I think we've got 4 buildings. I'm going to have to go through it. We've got our primary in year 7. We've got year 8, 9, and 10 in a building. Year 11 and sixth form. Yeah, 4 buildings.
Wow, gosh. And
But they're all pretty close together. I mean, it's a big school,
yeah.
but it's all within a very short walking distance.
Oh, nice.
It's all on the same site,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
everything. I mean, it's pretty close together.
Oh no, that
You know.
sounds good to me. Easy to navigate your way around and not get too lost.
Oh, definitely, yes. And then, they all, although playtimes are separated by age a little bit, the playground is universal, and there's a primary playground. So there's a lot of cross mixing of year groups at break and lunchtime at times, but it seems to, it works, and it's,
Really good. And for
yeah.
things like, do you use technology quite a lot? Do you use iPads and things like that, or Chromebooks in your setting?
Yeah, we have Chromebooks and iPads that the students can use, and they are really quite popular. So sometimes quite
Mm.
hard to get hold of.
I
Um,
bet.
and the pupils really do enjoy being able to access things on the computers. And I think part of our school remit is to expand our use of technology
Mm.
in schools. I mean, all classrooms have a whiteboard, and teachers are really good at introducing things, using what's available on the internet already. And it is really nice to be able to say, right, let's do this lesson using the iPads, or not the iPad so much, but the Chromebooks.
Mm.
And then we have iPads that students can use for communication through
Yes.
our SALT department. But I think it's an area that we would really like to engage with more and improve. I
Yeah.
think it's kind of one of my areas to develop within literacy. I just feel like it moves so quickly that
Blink
you
and you miss
think,
it,
oh,
type
this would
thing.
be great, and then it moves on. So I feel it's somewhere that I need to do a bit more research and decide what is really essential for our pupils. Well, not just me, as a kind of
Yeah,
group.
as a team. No, absolutely. That sounds really interesting. And I was thinking about in terms of trying to keep the learning going at home, especially with parents. And, it's obviously, as you know, as a teacher, not just teaching in school, but getting the parents on board and kind of reiterating the learning that you're doing within school. Things like if we focus on maybe reading, how obviously it might be different depending on the child's needs, but do you find it that you have to think of inventive ways to get parents on board with things like reading? Do you do competitions or certain schemes that you adopt, or are there ways that you can kind of engage parents to be as invested in reading at your setting?
I think our parents are invested in reading, and I think we probably have a same sort of uh, what's the word I'm looking for? Scope of parents. That's not quite the right word. Um, as any mainstream school would, you know, I think we have parents who are really very engaged in learning, and then some who are a lot less so.
Mm.
And I think that's the same in mainstream. I don't think we're unusual in that
No.
respect. And to get parents engaged, we do have, the usual things, like we have a very open relationship between staff and the parents, and they can, email in, they can talk to we talk to parents quite regularly to make sure that they know where their children are or how their child is doing, and so they can help at home. We do send home homework, and that is quite bespoke. Certainly from my point of view, you have to be very careful with homework because sometimes school is school
Hmm.
and home is home, and there's no crossover. And so
Yeah.
I had parents say to me, I can't get my child to do this at home because home is not for schoolwork, and they can't
Yeah.
bridge that gap. And you think, well, that's fair enough. So long as, and then I would say to them, as long as your child is doing something they're interested in, maybe talk to them about that. I mean, even if you just chat to them about Minecraft, for example, and encourage them to use some new vocabulary and talk about it, you're improving their communication skills. You're talking about things of interest. You're helping them learn how to engage in a conversation. So it may not be traditional home learning of lots of paper, but
Mm.
it is learning. It's all learning. Even if you take a walk with your child and look at all the different things that you can see and do some naming and labeling, you're
Yeah.
putting everything into a context that perhaps they didn't have just moments ago. So I feel like home learning at our school comes in many different ways. There's no one way of doing something. And I
Mm.
feel that many of our parents are on board with that idea that you can't, that perhaps traditional homework and reading a book and writing about it, or writing a book review, is not going to be the way their child works.
Hmm.
But reading a book together, talking about it, and then reporting back how they got on is the way it does work for that particular child. So
Yeah.
I think our parents are engaged much of the time. I mean, we have a parent cafe, a cafe
Oh.
actually, that you can come along to if you just live in the community, and it's really starting to take off. So it's like a proper cafe, and the students run it, and it has a children's area. So now um, people can bring young, like, up preschool children
Oh,
to
that's really.
come, and they have a chat, and then some of our students are there able to be play mentors, and they learn to play with these children, and so they're developing all these wonderful skills, and then they can take those home hopefully and
Yeah.
transfer these things. So I think it's quite an interesting approach that we have as a school, which is quite holistic. And you know um, learning is not just academic learning for us. Learning encompasses so much more,
Mm.
and it has to, because in some ways we have more to learn
Mm.
with our students, and in other ways our students need to have skills that are going to put them in the job market. And we need to be able to say, yeah, you can do this, and you may be up against someone with better qualifications, but look at all the skills you've actually
Mm.
got here, these soft skills, communication skills, you know
Definitely.
employability skills. So I think our approach is really holistic. I've gone massively off topic, I'm
Oh
sorry.
no, I love it. I know, I'm really invested because I was just thinking to myself, even though, like you said, you might necessarily have more to learn. I actually think, that's something I feel like in mainstream, and I think sadly it's the time, it's the capacity element that we are missing. I think it's those life skills that I really think are invaluable. And sometimes we put so much emphasis on, our reading, our writing, our maths, that it's like, and other subjects, that certain life skills can get kind of knocked on the head and assumed that they're being learned at home or they're experiencing those things. But, you know, I know people who are incredibly intelligent, have done very well academically, but in terms of general knowledge and common sense, massively lacking.
Yeah, definitely.
They can't
I
change the
think
light bulb, can't put a wash on.
I know it is tricky, or changing the bed, that's a learnt skill, I feel.
Absolutely.
You
There are
need to
many
be able
things
to.
we take for granted that are learned skills, aren't they? And I think that's really important that, giving children, no matter what setting, that opportunity is really invaluable. Do you have like a I don't know, like a household setup within your school so children can learn how to open a washing machine, put the washing machine on, dishwasher, whatever it might be?
Well, in our school kitchen, we do. So, I mean, they need to know how to do everything in the kitchen, really, and it's really well set up for children to be able to follow recipes independently, and they're kind of in different stations. So you'll have some who need a lot of support, some medium support, and others who are just cooking on their own. And then they all have to clear up, put things in the dishwasher, put things in the washing machine. So those skills are all part and parcel of the curriculum. We don't so much have, unfortunately, beds to make and that sort of thing, but they do touch on that sort of learning. And we do kind of talk to parents about the skills that they might need at home, and when we try and help as much as we can with the things that we have in school for kind of home learning. But things like getting changed for PE, and that happens in mainstream as well. But all those skills, the children get the opportunity to practice. And sometimes those things might be on an IEP,
Yeah.
like being able to have the dexterity to tie your shoelaces,
Hmm.
that sort of thing. So then there is a specific opportunity for children to learn skills that they have either highlighted themselves that they might like to be able to do, or their parents have said it would be really helpful if we can get this,
Yeah, that's fantastic.
this skill
Yeah,
done. So
good
it's
idea. Yeah.
yeah, it's all very personalized in many
Mm.
ways, and we try to really look at the individual as we teach, as much as you have to teach the curriculum here and everything else. It's really nice that we do have those times where you can be quite you can just concentrate on things that are beneficial to somebody, that you don't necessarily need to teach the whole class.
No, I love that. I love that. And there's so many things I could talk to you about, Emily. I mean, I find it incredibly interesting. And but I was just thinking, in terms of reading at your setting or any setting really, we can find it quite challenging to encourage parents to read, let alone the children. Have you got three kind of takeaway tips you could give to parents or to students, of things to help people engage with reading again and adopt a love of reading?
3 tips. I think the first one is, you know, enjoy something together. So whether that is looking at a map,
Hmm.
is reading a bus timetable, it
Mm.
doesn't really matter if it's not a printed word.
Mm.
It might just be a photograph. Just chat about something that you find really engaging, or your child finds really engaging, and ask and answer them some questions, because essentially that communication brings language, and with language, hopefully, will come reading. So that'd be my first thing. Just enjoy whatever it is that they enjoy, and
Yeah.
don't worry that it's not a book. That's fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
My second tip would probably be to um, read something together, a book, and even if you just read one sentence, that's reading, and that might just be the right amount for your child at home. Ask them a question on what you've read, and don't worry if they didn't seem to uh, answer it, if they didn't seem to understand it in that moment. I think it's all, by osmosis, things go in. So I think just have that moment of togetherness. And my third one would be enthusiastic about reading. Talk about what you do how you use print. Oh, I love reading the newspaper. Look at this lovely magazine.
Mm.
Even talking about a television program together, because reading, I think we need to slightly reframe what we think of as reading, because for some people reading is not about the printed word.
Mhm.
Reading is about comprehension. It's about how they use the language to talk. I think we have to expand our view of reading to make it more inclusive, so that we are including people for whom the printed word is perhaps out of reach, but for whom stories and newspaper articles, the news, all the things that we kind of look at, they are within reach. And reading shouldn't, not being able to read a printed word should not hold someone back from engaging in society, in life, in enjoyment, in friendship, in work. And I feel like if we can be inclusive as a society about what we believe reading is, we
Mm.
will have a lot of people who don't think they're failing, who don't feel embarrassed or ashamed, because you shouldn't. You know, e-
Absolutely.
everyone has something to offer, and you don't really always need to be the world's best reader to offer it, I think.
No, I love that. That's a really nice point to end on, Emily. So thank you so much for joining us today on the podcast.
No worries.
I've
Thanks so
absolutely loved it.
much.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll speak again soon.
I hope so. It's been a real joy. Thank you very much.